First of all, demographic revolution, my dear students, a word revolution there, we are speaking of rapid change. Rapid change. But rapid change of what? We are talking about rapid change in population. Rapid change in population. And population, my dear students, can change in very important three aspects. The first aspect of population change, it can be looked at the change in size. Change in size, or sometimes we call it change in statistics. And the second population change that we consider it as part and parcel of demographic revolution, it is the change in structure. Change in structure. In structure here, my dear students, we are referring to let's say let's say male and female. We also refer to children and adults. We are also referring to other things. So here we can consider sex. Here we can consider age, and so on and so forth. This is what we call the change of population in terms of structure. But also change in population can be viewed in distribution. In distribution. By distribution, we are looking at how those people are scattered. Where do they live? Do they live more in the urban areas, or majority of them lives in the rural area? So this is what we mean by by demographic revolution. So my dear students, demographic revolution that we're talking here, our main focus, my dear students, is the increase in population. The rapid change in population, as we have said, by increasing in terms of number. And the increase in population can be judged by very important two things: the increase of birth rate and decrease of death rate. We are talking of increase of birth rate and decrease of death rate. So if the number of people who are born increases and the number of people who are dying decreases, then the consequence to those two things, then it is the increase in population. And this is what we are talking about here, my dear students. If you look here in the beginning, between 1751 to 1801, population increased by 46%. And if you come to 1801 to 1551, to 1851, sorry, it grew much more quickly by 94%. And over the century, from 1750 to 1850, in fact, population of England was almost tripled. That means from 5.9 million people to 16.8 million people. That means it increased for over about 3 times. That is a very rapid increase of population. Thereafter, the pace, of course, slacked. But all in all, as you can see, in the period between 1851 to 1901, England population increased by 81%. That's a very, very high increase in population. This, my dear students, is what we mean by demographic revolution. But also, my dear students, as I said earlier, these changes in fertility and mortality, in fact, and population growth is what always described as demographic transition. Demographic transition. The change in population, as we said, is characterized by the decrease in death rate and the increase in birth rate, the decrease in mortality rate and the increase in fertility. What we get thereafter is the increase in population, and this, as I said, is described as demographic transition. My dear students, after looking at the meaning of this demographic revolution, let us now very quickly focus on the causes for demographic revolution. What causes population to increase? As I told you earlier, demographic revolution is a rapid change, but here we are speaking of rapid change in terms of increasing population. So what causes population to increase in England? We have got so many factors: social, political, and economic factors. Let us now start with the first factor, my dear students. The first factor for population increase, it is improvement in agriculture. Here, my dear students, we are speaking about Agrarian Revolution, a rapid change in agriculture, as we have said, which was characterized by the application of science and technology for qualitative and quantitative improvement of agriculture production. So the increase in agriculture production has contributed a lot to the increase in population, because people were able to produce a lot of food, and the food therefore was to be available at a cheaper price. So people could get food, people could produce food and be able to eat the varieties of food. And by eating varieties of food, my dear students, that is what we call a balanced diet. So people were eating a balanced diet. By eating balanced diet, then obvious you'll be able to avoid some diseases which are related with eating unbalanced diet. For instance, we can speak of kwashiorkor. There are some other diseases like marasmus, for instance, those diseases which are caused by people eating food which is unbalanced. And by eating balanced diet, then people were able to increase life expectancy. When you increase your days of living, it's always will cause the population to increase, because number of people who are dying because of such diseases I've mentioned, of course in some others, those people will survive. And the more people survive, then it means the number of people will keep on increasing, as long as people are still, many people are still born. So this is also what we can say as the first cause for the demographic revolution. The second cause for demographic revolution, my dear students, is the establishment of public health department. Establishment of public health department. My dear students, this is like what we call in our country the Minister of Health. It means, some years before 1800s in Britain, there was no public health department. It means there was no a proper way of treating people in the hospitals, dispensaries, and other health centers. But they came to establish public health department, and the people started to be treated in the hospitals, in the health centers, and they were able to provide medicine and vaccinations, trying to prevent the spread of some diseases. My dear students, you remember smallpox, typhoid, tuberculosis, and these were the endemic diseases which were so threatening the life of people in Britain. But because of the establishment of public health department, they were able to provide cure and prevention, and prevention by issuing medicines and vaccinations. So people were treated these diseases, and people who were to die because of those diseases, such people were to survive. And also there were cholera, was another alarming diseases. So my dear students, as you can see, because of what I've just said, then a lot of people were cured. Not only that, I have mentioned provision of medicine, vaccinations, and so on. Smallpox vaccination was one of a very important breakthrough to the, to the medical development in Britain. This, of course, there was vaccination which was introduced by Edward Jenner in 1796. In fact, he copied that medical technology from China, and it was introduced in Britain, and and they succeeded to prevent the spread of smallpox. Remember, my dear students, smallpox is one of the diseases which has killed a lot of people, not only in Britain, but but in Europe at all. A lot of people were killed by that smallpox. So they were able to provide vaccinations which will prevent the spread of such diseases. But also, my dear students, these measures, as I've said, they prevented the outbreak of diseases and the spread of such diseases. And some conditions like cholera, diarrhea, that could kill a lot of people. Those diseases, in fact, they were prevented from spread. They were prevented, or sometimes they were cured. So for that case, as I said earlier, demographic revolution is all about increasing the birth rate and reducing the death rate. So because of this, they were able to reduce the death rate, and because people were, because people were born, then the number of people have to increase for that matter. Another point, my dear students, is the improvement of hygiene and sanitation. Improvement of hygiene and sanitation. When we speak of hygiene, we are talking about the personal cleanliness. And hygiene, as I said, is a set of practices that contribute to good health. And that includes things like hand washing, bathing, and cutting hairs and nails. And this, of course, was very important for people's personal health. They were able to prevent some diseases which are associated with, with unhygienic practices and so on. And this, of course, was done by establishing different public latrines or toilets to manage waste, food preparation, washing stations where people could go and get baths, effective drainage system, and other such mechanisms. Because of all these things I've mentioned, they were able to to prevent to prevent the contamination of some diseases, which of course were killing a lot of people. So because of this, then they were able to increase the life expectancy. Here I've mentioned about the hygiene, but also there is sanitation. Sanitation is the general cleanliness, and this also was a very important measure to reduce the spread of some contagious diseases. And this includes the establishment of a proper way of taking care of the waste product and so on. My dear students, as you can see, this is a picture which shows the Victorian dust yard, the early recycling waste in early 19th century in London. This is in London, and you can see this is the waste. And they started a system of recycling the waste. That means all the waste products which have been dumped in some places, they were taken for recycling and they produce something else. And this is a very good way of taking care, of some waste products, which of course, if they were allowed to spread, they could cause some diseases, and in fact they could lead to some death of a lot of people. So by introducing this, they were able to prevent the possibility of people dying because of the spread of some diseases resulting from disposing this kind of waste. My dear students, another cause is the introduction of treated and tap water. Introduction of treated and tap water supply. They introduced treated and tap water supply. Earlier people used to die because they were drinking unsafe water. They were drinking unsafe and unclean water. So a lot of people have to die because of that. And remember, there are some diseases which are always associated with people drinking unsafe water. We are talking of diarrhea. We are talking of cholera, for instance, and so many other and so many other diseases which are associated by people drinking and contaminated water and so on. But those diseases were able to be prevented after the government of England decided to introduce a system of supplying a safe water. In fact, that water supplied through a proper modern system. So tap water supplied to the people, at least to prevent the possibility of people suffering from the diseases, as they said, resulting from people drinking contaminated water. My dear students, this is the example. This is a picture that shows a Chelsea Waterworks, which was originally constructed by engineer James Simpson for the Chelsea Waterworks Company in 1724 near the Thames River in London, in Chelsea, of course, to supply water to London Metropolitan. So, this was constructed in 1724, and this was constructed to supply water to metropolitan London. So you can see people of London from this year, they started to enjoy the safe water which was supplied by tap. This was another very important development. By doing so, as I said, they were able to prevent this possibility of the spread of some diseases which of course could kill a lot of people. My dear students, another very important cause of demographic revolution is the political stability in Britain. Political stability in Britain. For quite a long time, the British people, they have been free from political instability. In fact, no political violence has occurred in Britain since the civil wars of 1642 to 1651. Britain, remember, they have gone through what we call a glorious revolution of 1688-89. And this, remember, was glorious revolution. The revolution which was a bloodless revolution. There was no shedding blood in this revolution. After King James II decided to run away and vacate his throne, of course, to his daughter and his son-in-law, Prince William of the Orange. But then you can see, since this year, there was no war which was fought within Britain. This is quite contrary to other countries which were involving in different kind of wars. For instance, remember, in France, there were some wars. In Germany, they have to fight war of unification. The same applied to Italy. The Italians also were fighting war. But in England at this time, there were peace. So we are speaking of political stability, of one among the reasons for the increase in population in Britain. But how do we link political instability with the increase in population? Of course, it's very simple. Because if there is no war, then then people who could die because of war, those people the life of those people could be saved. Those people will not die because there is no war. But also, during the war, always people tend to remain indoor. People tend to remain indoor. They don't go out for production. And if you don't produce, let's say you don't attend your farm to produce food, it's obvious you are going to die of famine. You are going to suffer because of shortage of food. Also, because of political instability in those countries, you could see also people cannot concentrate in the, in the investment and so on. So, my dear students, as you can see, as long as Britain was enjoying a long period of political stability, then people in Britain were able to concentrate in production, and that, of course, had contributed to the increase of population. So, this is another very important point, my dear students. Let's now move to another point, and this is the early marriage. People were getting married at a very early age, as you can see. For instance, here you see in 1700, the average age of a man's first marriage in Britain was 27.4 years. And for a woman, it was 26 years. But, of course, later it decreased to 1830s to, in 1830s it decreased to 24.9 and 23.1 respectively. So, so early marriage, my dear students, has contributed to number of people to increase, because if you get married at the early age, it's obvious that you are going to have many children than those people who got married at the late age. So that has contributed to the increase in population. My dear students, we are going to see later in the next subtopics, when we discuss about the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834, that one of the reasons which made the implementation of that Poor Law Amendment of 1834 to become very difficult is because of increasing population, which resulted from people getting married at a very early age. So this also has contributed to the increase in population. My dear students, another very important point also which led to the increase in population in Britain, it was about the government policy of medieval time. Remember, in our previous subtopic, my dear students, of mercantilism, we spoke about characteristics of mercantilism, and that one among the very important characteristics of mercantilism, it was populism. That mercantilism was insisting, mercantilism was very much insisting in the increase in population. Why? Because high population was very, very important for the establishment of large and strong military forces. Also, large population was very important for collection of taxes. Also, large population, we said, it was very important as a symbol of prestige. It was a prestige for the country to have quite a large number of people. So this is also one of the reasons for the increase in population, that the government policy of medieval time, of that time, from 15th century there on, they were insisting their people, in fact, to have many children. So because of that, then the number of people who were born had to increase, at least to fulfill that government policy's requirement, which demanded people to have as many children as possible. So this also is one of the factors for the increase in population. My dear students, after looking at the factors for increase in population, after looking at the factors for demographic revolution in Britain, and one thing I want to insist before we move to another thing, my dear students, is the points that we have spoken, we made our reference from Britain, as I said earlier, because Britain was the first country to develop in these aspects which we are discussing. Was the first country to develop in Agrarian Revolution, was also the first country to develop in political revolution, and so we are going to see it in scientific revolution, and so also population in Britain was growing very faster than other countries, as we saw already. So what I have mentioned, therefore, as the causes can apply to some other countries as well, even though specifically we are speaking about Britain as what we're supposed to do, at least as the requirement of our study of today. Let's now go to another very important thing regarding demographic revolution, and this is the contribution of demographic revolution to the rise of capitalism in Europe. How demographic revolution has contributed to the rise of capitalism in Europe. Remember, my dear students, you know about demographic revolution now, that we are talking of the rapid change in population in terms of size, in terms of distribution, but very important in terms of structure. Size, we mean the number of people being increased. structure, it means the population, the population divisions in terms of sex, in terms of age, and so on. But when we speak of distribution, we are talking about the places where those people live, either in the urban or in the rural. Let's now talk about the contribution of demographic revolution to the rise of capitalism in Europe. The first contribution of demographic revolution to the rise of capitalism in Europe is the expansion of internal market. Expansion of internal market. The increase in population in Europe has contributed to the expansion of market. Remember, when population increases, it means the demand also increases. If you have 1 million people, the demand for clothes will not be the same if you have, let's say, 3 or 4 million people. A country which has got 4 million people, they are going to demand more clothes than a country which has got 1 million people. However, one thing have to be very clear is, here we are talking of population, but you'll have to consider also the demand. Demand is the ability of people to buy. So population increase, it has to go with the increase in purchasing power of those people. And that is when those people can become a market. So on the demand side, the demographic expansion increased the total volume of desired goods. Increased population has increased the total volume of desired goods. People who wants to buy some goods increase. So for that case, as the people increase who demands, also industries that produce those goods have to increase production, So if people are producing clothes by using hand, they have to invent, they have to invent a new method of producing by using machine, so that they can fulfill the market desire. So my dear students, the more the increase in population, the more people think of using a more sophisticated, and advanced way of production to fulfill the market demand. That's one. But also alternative demand side view contends that the rise in demand, that means as people demand more, large consumption of the market had also fostered both investment and innovations. As I said earlier, when demand increases, and you have got some people who want a lot of clothes there, then those people who are the innovators, they'll have to think and innovate and invent more advanced machine of producing more clothes at a time, so that they can fulfill the market. Remember, under capitalism, people want to maximize profit, and whenever you see the market there, which is so large, you start to think of the way you can use to produce and satisfy the market, but also for maximization of profit. My dear students, these two things I've said, for those people who are doing economics, for those students who are studying economics, you can start them more in the so-called the Keynesian, this is the Keynesian argument. The Keynesian argument. That means the argument which was given by a man called Lord Maynard Keynes. These words were given by an economist called Lord Maynard Keynes, and this is the way you can explain this. But then, my dear students, you can see, as I said, the expansion of internal market is one of the contribution of demographic revolution to the rise of capitalism the rise of capitalism in Europe. It's one of the contribution, as I've said, because it enlarged the market. My dear students, another very important contribution of demographic revolution to the rise of capitalism is that it led to the rise of working class, which is one among the two classes which that constitute a system of capitalism. A system of capitalism has got two classes. The first class is the class of capitalists. Class of capitalists are the owners of capital, my dear students. And also, we have the second class, which is the class of workers. The class of workers. The class of capitalists plus class of workers is what makes a system of capitalism. That means if there is no the working class, there is no capitalism. This is the way it is, my dear students. So, as what I have said, increase in population has contributed to the formation of working class, the rise of working class. And the rise of working class had constituted the rise of capitalism. So you can see this contribution of demographic revolution. But I know you can ask the questions, how this increased population is linked to the rise of working class. Remember, increasing population has made people to start to move from the rural area to go to the urban area, because there was no enough land for these people to work on. So they have to look for another alternative for their survival. So the only option these people had, it was to sell their labor power. They have to become workers. So they became workers because population has increased. And here, my dear students, we are speaking the fact that land is fixed in supply. Land is fixed in supply. That means you cannot increase land, and unless under what geographers call land reclamations, but this is not so common. So land is fixed in supply, and because land is fixed in supply, so if the number of people are kept on increasing in that piece of land, it's obvious that those people, one time, they'll have to look for another alternative. And the alternative to these people, it was to move and go to the urban areas to look for jobs. So increasing population has, in fact, resulted to a shortage of land, and so people have to look another alternatives. And alternatives was to go to seek for job in the urban areas. And others, in fact, they were working in the rural areas, in the plantations and farms, which were owned by the capitalists. So this is another very important contribution of demographic revolution to the rise of capitalism. Another very important point, my dear students, is that demographic revolution has contributed to the rise of capitalism through what we call a rural-urban migration. Rural-urban migration. Rural-urban migration. That means people were people were migrating, people were moving from the rural area to go to the urban area. But then how this one has to do with the increasing population? The increasing population, as I said earlier, has contributed to the shortage of land. That means land is fixed in supply, but people were kept on increasing. So some people had to move from the rural area to go to the urban areas. And going to the urban areas, my dear students, they found that in the urban area, there was nothing to do but to become workers. But also, they led to what we call urbanizations. That means the growth of towns. The growth of towns. So the areas which once used to be very small during the medieval time, they became so strong, especially toward the industrialization. We are speaking of some areas like Manchester, for instance. It was a very small town before Industrial Revolution, but because of that rural-urban migration, those areas became so large, and in fact they grew to become the very large towns. So my dear students, those towns which were just very small villages or very small urbans, they became so big urban centers, and they became the magnet of capitalist investment. They became the areas for the capitalists to invest their capitals and to establish their businesses and so on. And those capitalists were getting a lot of money, a lot of profit. And for that case, they were able to to reinvest the capital which they have generated because of the growth of towns. So rural-urban migration is one of the very important contribution of demographic revolution to the rise of capitalism, where the urban centers had grew and they became the magnet. They became the centers of the capitalist investments and so on. Another contribution is that demographic revolution has provided a working force in different sectors. My dear students, before the increasing population, people were concentrating, people were working only in one area. They were working in only one sector. Of course, majority of them, not all of them. They concentrated in working in one sector, and that was agriculture sector, because people were producing food. People, under feudalism, there is what we call that people were producing for use and not for exchange. But because of increasing population, then people started to engage in different sectors of production, as you can see. For instance, here we have some people engaging in industrial sector, others in mining sector, others in commercial sector, and others in social sector. And that has brought what we call division of labor and specialization. And my dear students, as you can see, wherever we have division of labor and specialization, is always that efficiency of production will increase a lot, So for that case, this has been able to push the development of different sectors of production, which led to the rise of capitalism in Europe and so on. My dear students, another thing is that demographic revolution has contributed to the advancement in science and technology. It contributed to the advancement of science and technology. As I told you earlier, that where you have the large market of clothes, then those people who were the innovators, they'll be forced at least to innovate some machine which will not only facilitate production but will also increase the quality and the quantity of what was to be produced, and to meet the widening demand of food and commodities. If, for instance, we have said that the increasing population has contributed a lot to the increase of production of food. How? Because it inspired Agrarian Revolution. My dear students, again we can borrow some ideas from the economists, and we can go back and look what was said earlier by people like Robert Thomas Malthus. Robert Thomas Malthus, he wrote his book which was called A Theory of Population. This was an economist, and he studied the increase in population, in Britain, in Britain where he was living. And in fact, he said population of Britain was increasing geometrically while production is increasing arithmetically. That means production was increasing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. This is the production. But population was increasing 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. Population was increasing as twice as much compared to production. So he said, because of this trend of increasing population, then people will die. There should be a war, that people will have to fight a war and die, so that the number of people can be reduced to be equal to the number, to be equal to the number of what is produced. But he was wrong, because increasing population instead has in fact inspired the increase in production. That's why we relate the increase in population with the development of science and technology. You can see the increasing population is what inspired people to come with the issues like enclosure system, people to come with issues like Agrarian Revolution, the application of science and technology in production of food and raw materials. And that has been able to solve the problem which in fact was, which in fact to Thomas Robert Malthus, he believed that it was a very great danger in which Britain has to face ahead. But that problem was solved because of the improvement of science and technology. But what inspired that to improve? It was the increase in population. So that's why we relate the increasing population with the advancement of science and technology. And the more this science and technology improves, as we have said, there was a Grand Revolution, there was the Industrial Revolution, and so on. Another thing is the contribution of demographic revolution. Another contribution of demographic revolution to the rise of capitalism, it was the growth and expansion of international trade. The growth and expansion of international trade. Because of increasing population, then it's obvious that you cannot produce everything on your own. In Europe, for instance, the European countries could not, each European country could not produce everything they need on their own. They have to rely upon each other. They have to have what we call international division of labor, in which one country can produce a certain good and other country can produce another certain goods. And then these countries can exchange what they are producing, of course, for the betterments of their country. So this has inspired the expansion of international trading. But also, because of increasing population, it also inspired the rise and expansion of mercantilism, where people started to travel from different areas. People were engaging in business. Remember, when the number of people is very small, it's obvious that people have to concentrate only in one activity. But as the number of people increases, then people have to will have to diversify themselves by trying to engage in different activities, including trading, including industries, including agriculture, of course, as usual, also businesses and so many other things, and so on and so forth. So this is another very important contribution. My dear students, after looking at the contribution of demographic revolution to the rise of capitalism in Europe, And now I know you know how has it contributed to the rise of capitalism, and how important is demographic revolution to the rise of capitalism in Europe. Let's now go to another very important part of our discussion, and this is scientific revolution. What is scientific revolution? Scientific revolution was a rapid change in the invention and discoveries in 17th and 18th century. Here there is a full stop, was not supposed to be here. So in 17th and 18th century, you know, this is what we call scientific revolution. There are two things here, my dear students. The first thing, we talk about the invention, and also we talk about the discoveries. So we have got scientific revolution, which include development in science and technology. In science, of course, we discover, and in technology, we always invent. So there is invention and discoveries. And this is what characterized European countries, particularly Britain, during these years I've mentioned, 1700s and 1800s. A lot of discoveries and invention were made to bring changes in different sectors of production. So production also has changed tremendously because of this invention and discoveries. It involves scientific and technological changes which brought revolution in the process of production and transportation, as we are going to see it in detail. My dear students, these are the evidence of scientific and technological discoveries and inventions in Europe. As I told you, we are going to look about these discoveries, you know, and the places where they have happened. The first, we are going to look at the textile industries. Why textile industries? The first areas to develop in terms of scientific and technological changes in Britain, it was textile industries. A lot of changes were made in textile industries starting from 1733, when this man called John Kay discovered a small machine which was called a flying shuttle, a machine which facilitated the production of clothes. Remember, before 1733, production of clothes was done, it was typically done by using hand. But with these discoveries of flying shuttle, at least they started to use some machine. This was a very small device, and this, of course, has simplified the process of spinning in the production of clothes. And then there were another discoveries which was made, invention which was made, and this was the invention of the spinning jenny. This was another great invention of the Industrial Revolution, and this was made by John Hargreaves. Another thing was the invention of cotton gin by Eli Whitney. This is an American in 1794, and this made cotton production to boom prior to introduction of textile industries. In fact, this was the machine which has been designed to remove the cotton seed, you know, from the cotton fibers. So this has speeded up the production, the production of clothes, converting cotton to become ready for production of clothes. Another, this is for the textile industries. Of course, together with some other development in textile industries, and in fact by by 1790 already a lot of changes were already by 1790s a lot of changes were already made in the textile production in in Britain and and in some other countries. So this is textile. But another very important technological invention was done by Joseph Aspin. Joseph Aspin in 1824. He devised a patented chemical process for making Portland cement. For making Portland cement. That was 1824. My dear students, you can see this was a very, very important breakthrough. The invention of Portland cement. That was a very important breakthrough. Why? Ask yourself a question. What do you think today we'll be using to make, to construct our houses, to construct bridges, and other different type of civil constructions, if there were no cement? But this invention was made by Joseph Aspin in 1824, and this has brought a lot of changes in the in civil engineering works. a lot of changes in civil engineering works. This is 1824. And another thing is, in 1784, Henry Cort succeeded in developing a method of converting a pig iron into wrought iron by heating it frequently, stirring it in the presence of oxidizing substances. This is another very important change which was made regarding the technological and scientific invention in Britain. This also has increased the production of iron. Remember, a lot of things thereafter were produced by using iron. So it was like a very important change. Remember, before that, people were always melting iron by using the very local processes. But the discoveries which was made by Henry Cort has brought a lot of changes to the transformation of iron, as was said, from pig iron to wrought iron. And that iron then was used in the construction of ships, construction of locomotive trains, the construction of railways, line, and so on and so forth. So that was a very important and very major big development. My dear students, another thing is the invention of tarmac road by John McAdams. Tarmac road. I know today we're speaking of macadamized road. Macadamized road were invented by John Adams. We shall come to see more in the Industrial Revolution. This was another very important development which was made by John McAdams. Another thing is the invention which was made by John Worth. This man, of course, has invented a steam engine. And so instead of people using horses, at least to pull the car, now people were using steam engine. And the steam engine was using also for pumping water, from the mines and so on. This was another very important development which was made in Britain regarding the scientific and technological revolution. My dear students, let's now very quickly look at the contribution of scientific revolution to the rise of capitalism. How this one has contributed to the rise of capitalism in Britain. How this has contributed to the rise of capitalism in Britain. The first, of course, is the machine replaced human labor to improve production. As we have seen earlier, that people are producing by using hand. People are producing by using hand. They used to have what we call a manual production. But because of the invention of machine, now people are producing by using the machine. And if you use the machine, remember, production always is going to be much more higher than ever before. Another thing is it is simplified transportation of industrial goods and raw materials. We said that there were some improvement in transportation sectors, especially the invention which was made by John McAdams, who invented the tar macadamized road. And so roads which once used to be rough and seasonal, those roads now have become good and unseasonal. That means they can be passed throughout the year. That's another very important development which was made in Britain and Europe in general, at least to make up to encourage or to stimulate the development of capitalism. Another thing is it is speeded up the collapse of feudalism. It is speeded up the collapse of feudalism. Remember, feudalism was always insisting the use of poor productive forces because that is the way they could use to exploit the serf and peasants. But because of the development of science and technology, some new tools of production like tractors, planters, combined harvesters were introduced in agriculture. And that, of course, it encouraged enclosure system and the collapse of feudalism. And remember, where there is feudalism, capitalism cannot rise easily unless feudalism collapses. That means the rise of capitalism, it was the product of collapse of feudalism. So thanks to this scientific and technological revolution that they facilitated the collapse of feudalism and gave rise to the capitalism. Another thing is it brought agrarian revolution. My dear students, we said in our previous subtopics that agrarian revolution, it was all about the application of science and technology in the field of agriculture for qualitative and quantitative improvement of agriculture production. So as you can see, agrarian revolution, therefore, it rose because of the application of science and technology. Remember, we are talking about the scientific and technological revolution. My dear students, another thing is it stimulated the growth of towns, such areas became center for the capitalist investment. The growth of towns, of course, we have said, those areas became the center for the capitalist investment. Why? Of course, as we have said earlier, development of science and technology, it contributed to industrialization. Even some people went there and started to establish their own workshop. And a place which used to have just a small number of people, that area started to grow and become a very big center, and so attracted a lot of capitalists who came to invest in that area. Another thing is it expanded the external and the internal market. Of course, we have said it already, that it expanded the internal and the external market. Also, through qualitative and quantitative improvement of production, it led to demographic revolution. Of course, we have said that increase in population, it was caused by the increase in agriculture production. We have also said it is also the result of the improvement of medical department, medical facilities, and all these things have a lot to do with science and technology. The last point, my dear students, our contribution is that it paved the way to the rise of bourgeoisie class. The group of people who are called the bourgeoisie, in fact, they rose because of these scientific and technological revolutions. By using improved science and technology, people with capital, they were able to increase production. And if somebody used to have a very small capital, in fact, he used to be a petty capitalist, he was able to accumulate quite a large amount of capital and become a capitalist or become a bourgeoisie. So this is another very important contribution of demographic revolution to the rise of capitalism. My dear students, after we have looked for the demographic revolution, the causes, and the contribution of demographic revolution to the rise of capitalism, and as well as the scientific revolution, as well as the contribution of scientific revolution to the rise of capitalism, let us now break for a while, and we'll be back to look for the questions that I gave you earlier. Welcome back, my students. Earlier in our study, remember, my dear students, I gave you some questions. And of course, after what we have gone through, now you can find how simple is our questions. Our first question was, analyze the causes of demographic revolution in Britain from 1600 to 1850. This question, of course, is very simple. The causes, just look at the causes. So the first cause, we have said it, was the establishment of public health department. And the second, we said improvement in agriculture, that this has contributed for production of food. And the people said at that time they were able to eat the so-called a balanced diet. The third is improvement of hygiene and sanitation. The diseases which could result because of people being unhygiene, because of the poor sanitation, poor environment, then those diseases were either cured or prevented by improving the hygiene and sanitation of the people's residence, as well as their personal, their personal cleanliness. Another point is introduction of treated water supply. We have mentioned and even show the picture that shows the, the supply of water in London metropolitans in what was called the Chelsea Waterworks. Another point is political stability. Britain was enjoying a very long period of peace, a period without war, and in fact, because of that, the number of people who could die because of war, that number was, that number was reduced, and for that case, my dear students, it increased the number of people who were living. And another point is the early marriage. Of course, we have mentioned it. When people are getting married at the early age, what we expect the most here is that they are going also to get children at the early age, and their number is going to be very high at the end. Because at the time a person reached, let's say, 50 years of age, that person could have a lot of kids, and so on. Another point is the government policy during medieval time. During mercantilism, the governments of Europe used to have the policy of encouraging populism, encouraging people to get birth and so on. So, my dear students, this is our first question. The second question is, demographic revolution accelerated the rise of capitalism in Europe. Substantiate this statement. My dear students, as you can see, we are talking of the rise of capitalism in Europe in relation to demographic revolution. Our first point is expansion of internal market. Of course, we have seen it. The second is expansion of working force, which of course we said encourage division of labor and specialization. Another thing is the rise of working class. We have also discussed about it. And the fourth is it led to the rural-urban migration. Also, it inspired development of science and technology. And finally, the growth and expansion of international trade. These, my dear students, are the answers to our second second question, as you can see, is very simple because all things I've mentioned here as our points, as our answers to the question, we have already discussed them. Question number 3, relate the Industrial Revolution with scientific and technological changes which occurred in Europe in 18th century. What is the contribution of scientific and technological changes which occurred in Europe in 18th century with the Industrial Revolution? Our first point here, my dear students, is that machine replaced human labor to improve production. Of course, we have said about it, that it is simplified transportation of industrial goods and raw materials from one area to another. And here we are talking of the improvement of transportation sectors, things like improvement of roads, improvement of canals, also the establishment of railway system. All these were the product of development of science and technology. Also, it speeded up the collapse of feudalism. Feudalism collapsed, as we have said. It brought Agrarian Revolution. It stimulated the growth of towns. Such areas became the center of capitalist investment. Also, it expanded the external and internal market. Also, we have said about it. Also, through qualitative and quantitative improvement of production, it led to demographic revolution. Of course, we said it. Particularly improved in agriculture production, which we said has improved also production of food. And people were able to eat the balanced diet, and that helped them a lot, at least to increase their life expectancy, and so demographic revolution. Also, it paved the way to the rise of bourgeoisie class. Of course, we said that the capitalists, who people with no capital, they were able to accumulate capital first to become the petty capitalists, and because of their involvement in different sectors of production, by using the advanced science and technology, they were able to transform themselves to become the bourgeoisie class, and so on. My dear students, let's now come to the end of our lesson of today. And with these 3 questions, my dear students, I'm pretty sure that you can answer any other questions from this topic. And so, let's come to the end of our lesson of today. Let's meet next time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Kipindi cha Darasa Online kimeletwa kwenu na Chuo Kikuu cha Sauti Mbeya.